Welcome to another Better Place Australia podcast. What do you do when a car yard approves a car loan that you never had the capacity to pay back in the first place? Christine is the Financial Counselling Team Leader for Better Place Australia and Financial First Aid, and she shares how she assisted a woman in this situation. So Christine, who are we talking about in this case study?
A young woman with a few kids, and it is a family violence matter, and it was to do with a car loan. And there's some really interesting circumstances around this one, and it took a bit of investigation to find out where it had all gone wrong.
Right. So how did you approach this one?
She came to us. She was a very competent young woman, and she was stuck with a car loan so the family violence had occurred. The partner had been removed from the property. So he's out of the picture. And when I discussed with her how this car loan came about, because she was on a parenting payment, she had not worked for many years. And I thought, this is odd that she had a car loan, yet she does not necessarily have the capacity to pay the car loan back.
Right.
So I asked the lender to provide all the contract details and all of the notes and information surrounding the granting of that loan. It was not through a bank, it was through a car yard finance product.
Right.
And the notes actually expressed and displayed that the partner and the client had gone to a car yard to purchase a vehicle for him.
Right.
During the conversation, when they had done a credit check for him, found out that his credit report was trashed, it was no good, so they could not do the financing for under his name. They then sourced her credit file, found that it was clean, so they put the car loan under her name.
Right. But it was in fact his car.
Yeah, she did very little talking at the interview at the car yard, but it was a very deliberate act by the car yard to put the loan in her name rather than in his. So it was very deliberate that they used her for that purpose.
Right. And so I guess you had to have some choice words with the car yard.
Spoke to the lender and said, what you've done is unconscionable lending. You've placed her in a very difficult position. You shouldn't have lent her the money. And you did it specifically because she was the better of the two for lending purposes.
Yeah.
They said, too bad, so sad, she has to pay the money.
Oh.
It's like, no, I don't think so. So what I then did was lodged a complaint with the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, AFCA,
Yeah.
and asked for mediation to take place.
And what happened?
Well, AFCA's process is that first off, you must try and resolve this with the lender.
Yeah.
And you must be specific about what your complaint is about. And for us, it was unfair lending practices.
Yeah.
Then AFCA then provide that information to the lender and give them an opportunity to resolve the matter before mediation. The lender did not want to resolve before mediation. So we went to mediation, which is with a representative from the lender and AFCA.
Right.
So AFCA basically sit in on the mediation to ensure that the discussion stays on track and that there is some sort of agreed outcome.
It sounds like the lender wasn't willing to budge.
No, they were being quite stubborn. And anyway, it turned out well. It turned out reasonably well. At this stage, our client had the car in her possession. So then the question was, do you want the car or not? She said, if I can keep that car, I will.
Yeah.
So the negotiation came around how much of the car loan would they be willing to discount on account of their poor practices. So we were able to negotiate a $10,000 car loan down to $3,500.
Wow.
So the agreement was that she would pay the $3,500 and keep the vehicle. And a further stipulation to that, which I had to go back and ask for, it was agreed in the mediation that also no default, no listing, no credit reporting activity in association with the residual $6,500 that wasn't going to be paid. They said that would be fine. But when they sent us the documentation to wrap it up, they had omitted that from that documentation. So just to be safe, just to ensure the client was protected, I asked them to add it to the documentation.
Yep.
And then once it was amended, then the payment took place.
Wow, you have to really be on the ball with that stuff, don't you?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, because there's differences around wording when someone says, I'm going to write off the debt versus I'm going to waive the debt. There's actually differences in those words.
So can you explain those very briefly?
A write-off means that the company may simply say, all right, we're going to write off the debt, but that's only from our books, so to say. So that debt could still be on-sold. And sometimes they do. I've written it off the books, but I will still sell that debt and some debt collector or debt buyer can play with it later. Whereas a debt waiver is where it is absolutely removed and it is not on-sold and it doesn't go anywhere else.
Right.
So you always have to be careful when we're discussing a waiver or simply a write-off or a charge-off.
So if it's unsold, does that mean you have to go through the mediation all over again with the new debt collector?
Well, yes. That was why I wanted it written in there, that it was not going to be unsold and that there would be no activity as a result on her credit file, so no penalty on her credit file.
And so how did she manage with the remaining debt?
Luckily, she had parents who were prepared to put up an amount of money if she could negotiate a reasonable amount. If not, the car would have been returned and all debt written off, bad word. It would have been waived, all debt, if the car was returned. So that's where it was up to the client to decide whether she did want to keep the car. If she did, could she pay the money? And yes, her parents were going to assist. Great. If there was no option to afford to keep that car, it would have been returned and all debt waived.
So I'm guessing she was quite rapt that you were able to come to that solution for her and that they agreed, right?
Yes, because her parents' budget was $5,000, and during the negotiation process, it was actually the mediator who suggested $3,500 would be a reasonable figure, and we were okay to settle with that.
That's Christine, Financial Counselling Team Leader for Better Place Australia and Financial First Aid. You can access free financial counselling from Better Place Australia if you live in a funded area in Melbourne or Geelong. Now, there's a long list of suburbs that applies to. So to find out if you live in a funded area, visit the Better Place Australia website or the Financial First Aid website and do a search for funded areas. Financial First Aid is an initiative of Better Place Australia.